And World Trophy Kids presented by Bad News Media. It is the college football week 3 betting preview. We are moving through the college football season. Very interesting games on deck. You look at this board, you might go, there's not a ton of great games. I beg to differ. I think that there's a lot of really interesting matchups here on the board this week. I think there's a lot of really interesting matchups for getting data points for what these teams are truly going to be. At week 3, we're really starting to see these teams for who they are this season. And this week specifically, there's a lot of matchups out there that I think are going to offer us an interesting look into these teams. There's notes we've been jotting down. Preseason work was done, highlighting, hey, is this group as good as I think it could be? A lot of transfers here. How are they going to gel? This is a week we start to really tell because there's a lot of interesting matchups, as I'll talk about here, where you go, this defense really seems outmatched here. This is a concern coming into the season. They're going to get a great test. Can they do it? This offense, this defense presents some interesting challenges. Can they maximize their strengths and minimize their weaknesses here? Talk a lot about that week in and week out. But if you're a more casual football fan, this may be the weekend. You take the significant other out. You play with the kids. You get outside the house a little bit because there aren't the kind of marquee brand matchups this week as much. But college football week 3 on Friday gets started off with a bang, though. Arizona, Kansas State line is at 7, over under 60.5. The over under has been moving here a little bit, and for good reason, right? These are two defenses that are going to play offenses that stylistically present massive problems here for them. For Kansas State, this is a secondary that has looked dangerously bad. The Tulane game was sort of eye-opening, I think, for all those, including myself, who had sort of high hopes that Kansas State will be competing for a Big 12 championship this year. I thought this was a team coming into the season that looks pretty good in the context of the Big 12. And they still very much could. This is not a Big 12 game because these two teams scheduled this matchup before the Big 12, before they were both in the Big 12. But Kansas State's passing secondary, it's been a rough start to the season, to say the least. It seems to be the major concern is communication issues. Seems to be, what's causing a massive breakdown. I mean, you have some guys just running wide open. And Arizona is a team that can take advantage of that. We have seen um Fafita and McMillan just absolutely go off. One of the best quarterback wide receiver duos in the country. This Arizona team, though, I've been relatively down on compared to, I think, the rest of the world, because while those two have been absolutely fantastic and will continue to be a force to be reckoned with, it's what surrounds them that concerns me. Defensively, I wasn't particularly high on the Arizona defense. They're going to get a great matchup here because what Kansas State lacks in a passing defense, they make up for in a rushing offense. Because my goodness, I talked about it coming into this season. DJ Giddy and Dylan Edwards presenting a thunder and lightning type of approach here, and that is exactly what they have been. Everything is advertised. Giddy's a nice, powerful back. Edwards gives you a nice off-speed pitch, really nice in the passing game. So I expect a lot of kind of wheel routes for him, being a nice kind of shiftier back. And then you have Avery Johnson, who they've seemed to have kind of held back from a running standpoint, which sort of makes sense. I think we're starting to see in college football coaches really start to question, what is our self-preservation, strategy here, because these seasons are long. We have an expanded playoff here. If we're probably in a league where there is not a secondary bid. So for the Big 12, you're probably only going to get your auto bid in, maybe a second team, we'll see, but it's probably unrealistic. Do I burn players and use high rates of usage for them in games that we could win without, or isn't a conference game and isn't going to go to our overall ability to win the conference championship? And I think we're starting to see that here with Avery Johnson a little bit. It'll be interesting to see if they kind of let him loose, because he is not the refined type of passer that we were hoping he may become. Still plenty of time, still very young in his career, certainly has some ability, great throwing on the move. But if you just turn him into a pocket passer, he isn't refined at that yet. It's not really a something that suits his game as well. So I'll be interested to see if they really kind of make him back into that dual threat quarterback. But he's got smaller stature, he's a skinnier kid. So the self-preservation question definitely comes into play here. I think I haven't made an official play in this game. I think there's a part of me that leans a little bit more Arizona from the covering perspective. I do think Kansas State can win this game. I think this game could potentially get out of hand, could be a track meet for sure. But because of the passing threat and the ability for Arizona to put up points quickly due to what they present and the issues Kansas State has had in that secondary, I would have a more lean to betting the underdog here. But it's not strong right now. Like this is a game that I'm more interested in just watching and figuring out, is this something that Kansas State can fix? Because this is a massive test. If they could fix their secondary, not to the point where it's never going to be an elite unit, I don't think, but just something they can get some stops here and there. The offense is good enough that I think they do kind of get into games and start to impose their will through the running game, control a little clock that way, and that could turn into Kansas State's favor here for a win. But from a betting perspective, I think Arizona is probably a nicer play. From there, we move on to Alabama, Wisconsin. This line has been moving a little bit, currently sitting at 16, over under 49.5. Oof, man. If this was a Wisconsin team from a couple years ago playing this Alabama unit, I'd be much more interested in Wisconsin right now. The Wisconsin offense is the part that kind of scares me. They just feel like a unit that is struggling to find an identity. And it makes sense, right? They're making a massive scheme shift from what Wisconsin has been and what we've known them to be, which is, the big uglies up front, grinding you down in the run game with a pretty elite running back and sprinkling a passing game here and there. They're moving to more of an air raid, slightly outdated version of air raid, probably. In Wisconsin, which requires a different type of athlete on the offensive line, somebody who's a little bit more agile, quicker feet. The running back room isn't as elite in depth as what we have come accustomed to at Wisconsin. Quarterbacking, Tyler Van Dyke, it kind of is what he is at this point in his career. He's fine, but in big environment, big games, can that turnover worthy throw rate come down? Can he actually execute and drive the ball down the field on a Alabama secondary that is definitely gettable here? I mean, there have been some massive alarm bells going off for this Alabama defense. The secondary, there are guys that have been running wide open the last couple weeks at a pretty startling rate. And I am high on Womack. I think he's going to be a great DC there. I don't know how long he'll be in Alabama because he'll probably get a head coaching offer here at some point in the coming years. And Alabama is also, going through a bit of a change. They're always going to get some great recruits on defensively, but this is becoming a much more offensive focused team, which makes sense with Kalen DeBoer taking over. It's something kind of talked about in the preseason, talked about when he got hired. Long term, I'm buying a ton of Alabama stock right now. I think this program, well, obviously it's not going to be the Nick Saban era. I think, Kalen DeBoer and what he's doing at Alabama, you see it on the recruiting trail early. You see the kind of success he's had at every program he's had a stop at. I think, overall stock arrow up for Alabama, but defensively, there are some massive concerns here. Is Wisconsin the team that can take advantage of it? Becomes the larger question. But then you flip the side of the ball. Alabama offensively, this is an offense. We talked about this coming into the season, or I talked about this coming into the season. Jalen Milroe, elite deep ball thrower, second in big time throw rate last season. He had 35 runs of 10 plus more yards, a mobile guy, but he struggles with the short to intermediate routes and being effective there. And I talked about it on social media a lot about how I thought Kalen DeBoer was going to help increase that for him, just by doing simple things, slowing the game down a little bit for him, scheming things up, helping him with his mechanics there, because he is very good at that in developing the quarterback position. We saw with Penix just recently and what he did with Penix in his college career, getting him to the NFL. And so that hasn't come to fruition just yet. It hasn't been the prettiest at times. I think part of that, though, it's not so much on Jalen Milroe as the offensive line is still trying to figure it out. They're dealing with injuries there. That's an offensive line that's struggling to get push here. I will say, I think one of the sneaky good hires this season, I said it in the preseason, was Alex Grinch. I know he's not a good DC. I'm not trying to sit here and defend that at this point, because the man can't coach from a defensive coordinator standpoint, but from a coaching from a secondary standpoint, he is very good at that. It's how he made his bones. He knows how to protect against high flying offenses because he was the DC under Mike Leach at Washington State. And he did a great job there. That's where he kind of made his name for himself. And it's what got him on the track to be the DCs at Oklahoma and USC. So I think that might be a sneaky good hire that comes into play here is Alex Grinch in that secondary, because I do think Wisconsin's secondary is pretty good. And is only going to get better under him out there. So that'll be interesting to watch out. I don't know if Alabama has it in them to beat Wisconsin by 3 scores with Georgia coming down the pipes here. It's why I like a first half much more and I think it's gonna be vitally important to kind of be watching warmups and seeing, all right, who's out there? Is Kalen Proctor, actually getting ready to go for this game on the offensive line? Who is dressed in on the offensive line and actually warming up? But I do think Alabama can come out to a fast start here. Oh man, I just don't have any faith in Wisconsin. If this number pops to like a 17, though, I may just on principle have to take Wisconsin. Because like I said, I don't know if Alabama has it in them to put up the type of effort needed to cover a 3 score spread in this type of game in Camp Randall in a tough environment. It's going to be rowdy as heck. I just don't love the Wisconsin offense enough to play them right now. But if it gets to 17 and a half, I may have to put a little bit on there just from a numbers standpoint. Game day heads to South Carolina for LSU. South Carolina line is sitting at 6.5, over under 48. Man, do I want South Carolina to be back. That is one of the cooler environments in college football, I think. One of the more underrated environments in college football. I'm excited for game day to kind of once again show off what South Carolina is. I wish they were more back. I remember growing up on the East Coast in the Virginia area and watching those Garcia, Lattimore, Jeffrey, DJ Clowney, 2010s, Connor Shaw, the dude who looked like a Marine out there playing quarterback type of teams. Absolutely electric environment. South Carolina is awesome when the program is going. There is a bevy of young talent on this South Carolina team. So maybe the years looking forward are going to be pretty good for South Carolina football. I'm not entirely bought in on Beamer just yet. I know he's got some nice wins under his belt. The consistency lacks there a little bit on the coaching side. Let's see if he can be more consistent. But there's a lot of young guys in this program that give you a lot of hope. But it would be awesome if South Carolina, an environment that is wildly underrated, especially in that region, because you have Clemson, you have Virginia Tech, you have the Georgias, and I feel like South Carolina sort of goes under the radar a little bit here. But man, do they get after it at South Carolina? Is that sandstorm starts to get going, and whoo, that party is rocking. But from a game standpoint, South Carolina's passing attack is what concerns me here. LSU's secondary does not look good through the data points we have right now. This is a secondary that if South Carolina is able to pass on LSU here, open season on the overs for sure. Because South Carolina currently sitting at 112th EPA per pass. So if LSU secondary can't have success here, it's going to be over city for LSU moving forward. Blake Baker, the DC for LSU, he's relatively aggressive. I like his play style. He's got Perkins, who is just an athletic freak. And I think that's going to be a big key to this game because Sellers, the quarterback for South Carolina, can be more mobile. You get him off his spot. He is a more mobile guy. You got to put him in bad positions. I think Perkins will sort of spy him here and play him a lot. Sorry, need a little water here. And then you flip the side to the LSU offense, right? This is an offense that coming into the season, I talked about this offensive line being maybe the best in college football, which is not a wild take. There's a ton of others out there that would have agreed with that. To that expectation, they have wildly underperformed, I thought. It's not all bad, though. I think they're really good in pass protection, and it shows. Garrett Nussmeier's had some good time here to do his thing. He has 0 turnover worthy throws so far this season. He's tied for most touchdown passes in the season right now. Like he has, created a nice floor for LSU here, and part of that's on him, and I'll talk about it in a second. Part of that's also the offensive line being better in pass protection, but they are bad at running the ball right now. 113th in success rate rushing. They're getting virtually 0 line push right now for a group that had high expectations because they have NFL caliber guys, high level NFL caliber guys on this offensive line. They have to get going. At some point, they have to be able to present a run game. And with weather concerns being playing into this game, that's going to be even more crucial. Like weather's going to be something to watch here because right now LSU is very reliant on the pass. Lacey is that guy at wide receiver. Garrett Nussmeier has been really nice. Talked about it coming into the season. Had a really nice ADOT, was an aggressive quarterback, not afraid to take the big shots, but would he be willing to take what the defense gives him? There was a really big focus by Brian Kelly on that this offseason and making sure that, hey, the play's more designed to attack the short to intermediate side of the field. Let's actually do that. Let's not just wind it up and toss the rock, 40 yards on a deep bomb. Like, let's take a little bit of what the defense gives us here. Let's play smart. And he has done that. Like, he has adapted. The downside is he just doesn't have the mobility that Jaden Daniels had, and that was massive for this offense to have some form of a rush attack last year. Talked about in the preseason, what would that look like without Jaden Daniels' legs being a part of this run game? Would they be able to run the ball successfully? And the answer's been no so far. So this will be a massive game. And you've got Dylan Stewart on the edge for South Carolina. My goodness, this dude is just a freak. If there was, arguably the best freshman in the country right now, the bend this guy has is incredible. He gets after it, but he is more currently better in passing down situations than running down situations. He doesn't set the edge as well as he probably should. And that's not like a crazy thing to say. The kid is incredibly young in his career, freshman right now. True freshman having the production he's having. But this is why it becomes important for LSU to be able to run the ball, to keep him off balance, to keep him in a position of having to guess and not just pinning his ears back and getting after the quarterback. So that'll be a really interesting matchup. Right now at 6.5, I am leaning LSU, but once again, weather is the concern. And the reason I'm leaning LSU is because I just don't know if South Carolina has the horses offensively to stay in this ball game late. Early, I think they're going to come out storming. Sandstorms going. That South Carolina crowd is absolutely rocking. Great environment, ready to attack the day type of mentality for South Carolina. They're going to get out the gates hot. But can they stay the entire fourth quarter? Can they not fade late into the night type of deal? I know it's an afternoon game at 12 o'clock, but it's something to be mindful of for sure. Boston College, Missouri. I don't have a ton on this game outside of I am taking Missouri. I think Missouri's held a ton back. It's currently sitting at 15.5. So that's the number I'm going to lock in under 54. BC's a nice story because they beat FSU, but we know FSU isn't really worth their salt at this point. Missouri has held a ton back. The usage rates for Luther is non-existent. Florida State, there were things in that game that Florida State easily could have won that game. And then this is a different conversation. But Florida State wasn't able to capitalize on BC's mistakes. Missouri is plenty capable of that, offensively and defensively. I know a lot's been made about, how they've held out, shutout games so far this season. The competition level hasn't exactly been there. BC will have some ability to score here. I like long-term what's happening at Boston College program right now. Bill O'Brien is getting them on the right track, but Missouri's a lot to handle here. I just, the returning production, the fact that they really haven't shown much, they have really treated the first 2 weeks of the season as a preseason. They're resting guys. They're keeping their usage down. There's some self-preservation here, knowing their schedule is soft this year. And they're going to be one of the SEC bids as long as they get through it with winning outright, or not winning the SEC outright, going undefeated. So I'm taking Missouri here. I don't think they have shown what they're truly capable. I think BC, while everybody loves them right now, for good reason, they made FSU look like fools on national television. So I get why people really like them right now. But we know what FSU is at this point, and Missouri is a team that can absolutely take advantage of the mistakes that FSU just wasn't able to take advantage of in that game. From there, we head to the backyard brawl. West Virginia versus Pitt. Line is at 1. West Virginia is the favorite right now, over under 63.5. Oof, coming into the season, a lot of concern about the West Virginia secondary. Was this a secondary that could gel? Because there was a lot of pieces. They went portal heavy because they had to replace a lot. And so far through 2 games, it has not looked good. And Pitt's a team coming in running high tempo right now, which is surprising knowing Pat Narduzzi. And a team that really kind of looks like as the offense goes, so will they type of deal. So this will be a very interesting game. I don't have a bet right now in this. I may give it out on social, so make sure you're following me at the Trophy Kid on TikTok, at the Trophy Kid on Twitter. I'll give out the play there if I do kind of pull the trigger on this. But Pitt is their season is going to go how their offense goes. I think at this point for West Virginia, secondary is definitely a concern. Offensively, I like what they're offering in the run game. They should be able to run the ball pretty well here. You got to get Garrett Green going in the right direction. Last year they made it super simple. It was really kind of two things. We're taking a deep shot here, or the play is designed to get the ball out quick. And if you can't do it because of what the defense presents, take off. You're an athlete. Go be an athlete in space. I think they might have to get back to that philosophy. I think they tried to put a lot more on his plate. I don't know if it's necessarily suited. We'll see. Like this will be a good game to see. Maybe he is. It's a very good data point for us. But I don't have a ton there. Washington State in the Apple Cup. Line is at 5, over under 55.5. This game is at a neutral site. Rivalry game should never be at a neutral site. I understand that there's, some revenue things at play here, some other dynamics as to why they moved this to a neutral site, but this game should never be at a neutral site. Rivalry games should never be at a neutral site. They should be on campuses and alternating year in and year out. It gives them more juice. It makes it an awesome experience. Like they're talking about how the stadium might not even be half full this week, which sucks. Like get this thing back on stadium or on campus. But from an actual game standpoint, very interesting matchup. This, listeners are probably not going to love this, but like this is a data point game. What are these two teams? A lot of questions coming in for Washington this year because there's so much new from last year's team, new coaching staff, basically an entirely new roster, virtually zero players from last year's team on this unit. And so far, I thought they've been a pleasant surprise. Like the way I've watched them, rushing has been a success for them. Coleman's been fantastic. Will Rogers has been doing a good job commanding the offense, I thought. Defensively, Steve Belichick talked about this. The Belichick system is one that doesn't ask players to do more than they can actually do, does a really good job of highlighting strengths and minimizing the weaknesses. I will be very interested if we see, how they elect to defend this Washington State team, because John Mateer, that Texas Tech game, where did that come from? That man was running all over the place. If you guys are unfamiliar, John Mateer got to another level in his game during Texas Tech. He had 21 carries for 197 yards, averaged 9.4 yards per carry, only threw the ball 19 times, 115 yards, 6.1 yards per attempt. So, but it's the running game that makes me nervous here. Is Washington a team capable of dealing with a quarterback that is this mobile, that can be a true dual threat here and add an electric level to this matchup? That is a question here. I don't know the answer. Like I don't have enough on this Washington defense, and I'm not going to sit here and BS the listeners. We respect you. We love you as a part of our show. Our fans are what make us here, and I do not want to kind of give you BS. I don't have an answer here. I cannot tell you how Washington State is going to elect to guard him. I could tell you if it was Bill Belichick, but I don't know if Steve is going to, the assumption is probably safe that he will apply a lot of his father's teachings, which are get quarterbacks off their platform. How do you do that? You apply a lot of pressure up the middle, and then you just got to make sure your edges are actually setting the edge and maintaining discipline. And if you can do that, things can go well. But we saw plenty of times those Patriots defense have trouble with mobile quarterbacks. Does that stay here? I don't know. We shall see. That's the beauty of this game. This is the point. Like I'm leaning Washington. I'm starting to become a little bit higher on Washington overall because I really like the staff with Carroll on the offensive side and Belichick on the defensive side and Jed Fish overseeing the whole show. They've been a nice running attack right now. The offensive line has looked better than I initially anticipated. Defensively, I liked what I've seen from a scheme standpoint the first 2 weeks. But this is a big test with a quarterback that can do a lot of different things on you. And that is going to be a very fun one to watch, I think. The last game to talk about is UCF versus TCU. Line is sitting at, let's see, this has been on the move. I need to find it. I think it was sitting at 2.5. It was at 2.5 when I composed my notes for the show, but I know it's moved since then. And it's sitting at 1 right now. Over under 62.5. I can't wait to watch this game. If you're a fan of the show, I was super high on UCF coming into the season. This is just a runaway train from a running game standpoint. It is everything you wanted it to be and more. They are able to run the ball at a very impressive clip here. Can KJ Jefferson be a threat passing wise? That was the question. Can Gus Malzahn, goodness, instill that confidence again in him that we saw early in his Arkansas career, where he was an efficient passer? We haven't seen it yet. We shall see. The biggest question, though, in this game are what does the trench play look like? This is going to be massive for these two teams. When I talk about a game that I am highlighting to go, I got to watch this to get something on how to take advantage of these teams going into conference play. This is what I am talking about. How good is that TCU offensive line? A lot of new parts on there. Only 2 returning starters from last year's team. They brought in a ton of transfers to try to figure out what this rotation could look like from an offensive line standpoint. UCF, what does your front look like? Is this defensive line as good as they think it is? Because they think it's the best one they've had at their time at UCF. Is it truly that? I don't know right now. Right now, I kind of like it. They're doing a good job of shooting gaps, playing disciplined football on the defensive line, creating some good havoc. But can they do it in higher competition? That's always been the question, for UCF. When they step up, can they punch up in the trenches? Massive for them because the secondary is good. I like the secondary. If they can do that in this game and they can play well on a defensive line standpoint, offensive line looks good for UCF, and KJ shows a little bit more in the pass game. Whew, watch out. UCF is coming this season. All right. But if they are getting pushed off the ball defensively, if TCU's offensive line is having their way with them here a little bit, reason for concern for UCF's outcome this season for a team that was a bit of a dark horse to win the Big 12. But for TCU, let's see what Hoover looks like. Let's see what this pass or run game looks like. Can the offense line, gain some momentum here? That is kind of what I'm looking at. It's all trench plays what I'm looking at right now. So 4 plays as of right now. I am going Bama first half, Missouri minus 15.5. Purdue Notre Dame under. This is one of the problems with not having a recap show. Notre Dame getting upset last week, beyond baffling, right? You can't have that loss if you're Marcus Freeman. When you go back and watch it, does it make a lot of sense? Yeah, absolutely. Why does it make sense? Riley Leonard's not a good passer. We talked about it being a major concern. There's a reason he's not in the NFL right now. Great escapability, mobile guy, physical quarterback, can get downhill on you, but he lacks a lot in the passing game. Coming into the season, that was a massive concern. That absolutely played out in that game. Now, he did sustain an injury. They're acting like that is not a massive injury. Maybe it's not. It's to his non-throwing shoulder, tear labrum. Maybe not a big deal. I'm concerned from his ability to be a mobile quarterback, though, because you're going to be leading with that shoulder, protecting the ball. Can you take hits? How uncomfortable is it going to be? It sounds like it's a pain tolerance type of thing. So let's see and monitor that. But offensively, Notre Dame does not present a ton of threats here. And defensively, they are still very good. So I do have the under in Notre Dame Purdue. UCF money line, I am going to take it. I was high on UCF. I think they are going to show out in the trenches. I am taking their money line. LSU minus 6.5. I am monitoring that from the weather standpoint. Right now, I like LSU minus 6.5, but I want to see what the weather reports look like day of. Like we talked about. Another game I didn't talk about, but worth highlighting real quick. Colorado State. Colorado State's talking a lot here. And from a player personnel standpoint, I don't know if they can back that up, but it's a rivalry game that will happen. Colorado, on the other hand, this has to be a tune-up game. They have to get something straight. There was a thread going around on Twitter a couple days ago about that Colorado offensive line. Oof. Not good. I mean, miscommunication. You're sliding protection. You got a left tackle going out for a screen. Guys going right. 2 guys going left. It's just, it is terrible. I mean, it's baffling to see. It's a coaching issue for sure. I don't want to throw them completely under the bus, but like that is what it is. There's a coaching deficiency in Colorado. Deion's not expected to coach the offensive line. He helped bring in some additional talent. It's a hard job to hire for because just look at the optics, like Deion's probably not there next year. You're going to play daddy ball a little bit. offensive line will be the first one to get thrown under the bus. Not a super attractive jobs for a lot of offensive line coaches to probably take. And it's showing because the offensive line talent wise is better than last season. But from a communication standpoint, from a hand placement standpoint, from being able to actually play the positions, tons of mental busts. Like it's not just a physical thing. Nebraska is a bad data point because Nebraska just was physically imposing. Like Colorado didn't have much chance, but there's just some baffling busts, mental busts in that game that just cannot be happening. So this is a game to get right in. They have to get right here. If Colorado can't win this game, you might as well just call it a day. Like at what point, if they can't beat Colorado State, I think we're going to start talking about at what point does Shadur and Travis just shut it down for the season and this thing completely implode, because this is a game they should win. Line's at 7. I would honestly consider taking Colorado. Colorado State just doesn't have it this year. This team is not anywhere close to what it was last year, but we'll see. I mean, maybe it's a rivalry game. Anything can happen, but there needs to be some work done there. So those are the bets as of right now. Looking for more. I'll give out some on social on game day because monitoring the weather report. There's a couple that I'm monitoring numbers on that we didn't cover here in this. So hopefully you got some good information. This is going to be a huge kind of week for data. And then once we kind of get through this week, things are going to start to open up. A lot more bets are going to start coming through the show. A little bit more organized as far as like, this is actually what this team is, I think, at this point. So kind of the show we're traditionally used to, but it's hard in college football right now with all the movement. We are starting to see that teams that are really dependent on high school recruiting and have stability are showing out the best here and are tending to be the best early in the season, which makes sense. You know, it's similar to the NFL. You know, we see play be a little bit sloppy in weeks 1 and 2 until they start to get things cleaned up. I think in college, the runway is until about week 3. These teams that are transfer portal heavy struggle early. And so it's an adjustment we got to make. And we'll see. It'll continue to go on, but hopefully you enjoyed the show. Hopefully you're checking out the social media content. And as always, peace.